Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Do Hongyu in Beijing. Coming up, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is on an official visit to China, expected to strengthen bilateral ties. The Chinese mainland unveils a package of policies and measures to boost exchanges with Taiwan. And the United States and Iran failed to reach a deal after talks. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. Our first story. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is on an official visit to China. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said the 5-day visit marks Sanchez's fourth visit to China in 4 years. During the visit, Chinese President Xi Jinping will meet with the Spanish Prime Minister. Chinese Premier Li Qiang and Chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee, Zhao Leji, will hold talks with Sanchez. It's reported that he will visit the headquarters of tech giant Xiaomi and host a forum for Spanish and Chinese firms in the fields of energy, infrastructure, bioscience, and technology. Sanchez is also reported to visit the Chinese Academy of Sciences. So joining us online is Dr. George Zogopoulos, Senior Research Fellow with CIFE, a France-based research organization. Thank you for joining us. First of all, how would you interpret the timing and purpose of Prime Minister Sanchez's visit to China?
Well, it is an important visit which is taking place in a period during which the world is suffering from uncertainty and geopolitical instability, fueled recently by the decision of the United States and Israel to start a war against Iran. But at the same time, relations between Spain and China have been stable for years. So I would consider that the timing is important, but I would also see continuity in this important visit of Pedro Sanchez to China for the fourth time.
And Sanchez will reportedly visit Xiaomi, the Chinese company. What do you think is the purpose of this visit?
Well, I would consider Spanish-China ties as multidimensional, and certainly investments and trade are at the epicenter of attention. So the decision of Prime Minister Sanchez to visit Xiaomi is indicative of the interest of Spain to expand economic ties with China. And Xiaomi is a company which has been famous for its achievements in different sectors, from mobile phones to electric vehicles. And this itself demonstrates why the Prime Minister of Spain has decided to make this visit.
And Sanchez is also reported to visit the Chinese Academy of Sciences. So what role could scientific collaboration play in strengthening the relations between China and Spain?
Innovation is key to economic success, and in that regard, the success of China in boosting innovation is remarkable. And I would consider that the decision of Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, to visit the Chinese Academy of Sciences is linked to his decision and his determination to unleash innovation in Spain by collaborating and building synergies with China. Recently, China and the European Union made an important achievement as far as space collaboration is concerned. And having said that, I would consider that the decision of Prime Minister of Spain to visit especially the Chinese Academy of Sciences is indicative to his vision he has for his country through collaboration with China in this area.
And Sanchez is also going to host a forum where he will meet both Spanish and Chinese firms in the fields of technology and infrastructure and energy and so on. What do you think he's trying to achieve by this forum?
Once again, I would suggest that Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, believes that collaboration with China is necessary. And from the moment he believes so, certainly the area of technology where China is thriving is central to his attention. So we can expect more synergies as far as Spanish-China relations are concerned. And certainly, once again, China has an impressive record as far as technological achievements are concerned. So the vision of the Prime Minister of Spain, as far as his country is concerned, is that the future can be better only if collaboration with China is possible in different sectors and areas.
China and Spain have strong economic ties. China is Spain's largest trading partner outside the EU, and Spain is an important partner for China within the bloc. Based on these, what practical outcomes do you expect Sanchez's visit is going to reach?
Continuity is the most important element in relations between Spain and China because this is the first visit of the Prime Minister of Spain to China. So practical outcomes are expected to be strengthened as far as this collaboration is concerned, from tourism and energy to technology and culture. And before Christmas, when Prime Minister Sanchez was there, we discovered, for example, that education collaboration has been at the epicenter of attention during that visit, and that Chinese students can study in Spain and Spanish students can study in China. So we expect all this trend to be further cemented because, as I said, it is continuity that matters, and continuity can shape better outcomes in the interest of both countries and also in the interest of stronger ties between China and the European Union.
As you said, this visit marks Sanchez's fourth visit to China in 4 years. So what do you think of this level of engagement, and what does it reveal about the consistency of Spain's China policy?
Well, the word consistency that you use is very important. I would say that the policy of Spain vis-à-vis China has been standard and diachronic, and this is very important in a world marked by unprecedented changes. And generally, I would say that Prime Minister Sanchez believes that it is impossible to build a multilateral world without the participation of China. So dialogue with China is important, but dialogue can also lead to synergies and practical outcomes. So the fourth visit itself is demonstrating that Prime Minister Sanchez believes that it is in the interest of Spain to do things together with China.
Mm-hmm. And alongside Sanchez, several European leaders, including those from Ireland, Finland, Britain, and Germany, have visited China so far this year. What does this suggest about Europe's broader diplomatic and economic approach to China?
It is impossible to understand a multilateral world without the participation of China. So China's role in safeguarding multilateralism and in safeguarding collaboration on the international level is of high significance. And I would explain the interest of more and more European leaders to visit China in that regard. Certainly, the administration of President Trump is causing some problems and frictions to transatlantic relations. And this is also another factor that needs to be taken into account as more and more European countries are attempting to look not necessarily for alternatives, but for partners in a changing world. But I would consider the decision of several leaders to visit China a development irrespective of the policies of President Trump, because China's success and China's role in the international system is diachronic and goes beyond political developments in the United States. In other words, it demonstrates that it is impossible to hope for stability and world prosperity without fostering dialogue with China. More and more European countries understand that strategic autonomy is crucial for Europe to be robust in the international system. And in that regard, closer ties with China are important. So to foster dialogue with China and to look for synergies, despite problems which can possibly exist, is the only way forward. Certainly, the presidency of Donald Trump is making several European countries quite skeptical about the role of the United States, but transatlantic relations remain strong. I would rather emphasize the importance of strategic autonomy. That means that the European Union needs to be strong in the international system, irrespective of political developments in the United States.
Then how would you foresee the future development of China and the European countries?
I would say that the future developments of China and the European countries will be based on areas of collaboration and areas of disagreement. But what matters is for the two sides to continuously talk to each other in order to solve differences. I don't expect a situation where the two sides will agree on everything, but I expect a situation where the two sides will sit together on the same table in order to discuss how common challenges could be better managed. And these common challenges cannot be managed or dealt with if collaboration does not exist. That's why I'm slightly optimistic about the future of relations between China and the European Union.
And could you please further elaborate on what differences China and European countries need to put aside for now and what common grounds they need to seek?
As far as the economy is concerned, for example, the European Union is demanding from the Chinese side for a deeper access in the Chinese market, which is one of the most standard claims that the European Union is making. And China at the same time is complaining about protectionism in the European market. So these, for example, different interests of the two are being negotiated for years, but it does not mean that disagreements which exist should prevent dialogue. At the same time, as far as collaboration is concerned, I would say that world peace and prosperity are at the epicenter of attention. So the two need to guarantee multilateralism. As we are seeing today's world, unilateralism is the main trend that the United States is applying in order to exercise its foreign and economic policy. But this does not necessarily serve the interests of China and the European Union. So if they focus on how to safeguard multilateralism, it can, I would say, spread some optimism concerning the future status of the world order.
Okay, thank you. And that was Dr. George Zygopoulos, Senior Research Fellow with CIFE, a France-based research organization. Coming up, the Chinese mainland unveils a package of policies and measures to boost cooperation and exchanges with Taiwan. This is World Today. Stay tuned.
Welcome. I am Chu Zhang, Deputy Director at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Fudan University. On the World Today program, we will dive beyond the headlines to uncover the stories, trends, and impacts that connect states across the globe. Join me on World Today.
This is World Today. I'm Do Hongyu in Beijing. The Chinese mainland has put forward a package of policies and measures to boost exchanges and cooperation across the Taiwan Strait. The announcement came as a delegation from the Chinese Kuomintang Party has wrapped up a 6-day visit to the mainland. The package includes a regular communication mechanism between the Communist Party of China and the Chinese Kuomintang and an institutionalized platform for youth exchanges. Meanwhile, the sharing of water, electricity, and gas between Fujian province with Kinmen and Matsu and cross-sea bridge construction will be promoted. The mainland will also fast-track the resumption of regular direct flights across the strait. For more, we're joined by Liu Kuangyu, researcher at the Institute of Taiwan Studies and the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Liu.
This is Kuangyu.
So first of all, these new policies were released right after the Kuomintang delegation's visit to the mainland. What signal does this timing send?
This timing, I think, it sends a clear strategic signal about Beijing's approach to Taiwan. First, it underscores a key message, which is our political foundation, that adherence to the common political foundation, i.e. the 1992 consensus and opposition to the Taiwan independence, unlocks tangible benefits. And these policies, they build on this foundation. They offer practical incentives for Taiwan compatriots, signaling support for pro-peace forces on the island. And also we can see these policies, they reflect refined, people-centered engagements on Taiwan work. We see measures include youth exchange platforms, infrastructure links between Fujian and Kinmen Matsu, and also restore direct flights, easier access for Taiwan's agricultural products, and pilot personal travel programs and so on. And they all target daily life and future generations, making more cross-strait ties even more relatable. And lastly, I think those measures the timing demonstrates a sincerity in promoting peaceful development. By prioritizing welfare and integration, I think Beijing now aims to foster kinship and share prosperity, aligning with broader goal of national rejuvenation.
One of the policies and measures calls for exploring the establishment of a regular communication mechanism between the CPC and the KMT, especially an institutionalized platform for youth exchanges. Why does it matter?
Yeah, it matters because it shifts party-to-party interactions from ad hoc visits to sustained institutional dialogue, and this provides a stable channel for high-level communication across the strait, and helping to prevent misunderstandings and manage cross relations, even amid political fluctuations. And also, with the use changes part, they are an investment in the future by creating a regular platform-based framework, like, for example, invitations for 20 Taiwan youth groups to visit Chinese mainland. I think this policy aims to foster mutual understandings and emotional connection among a younger generation who will shape long-term cross-strait dynamics. And third, it helps to break the so-called information bubble many the Taiwanese youth face. We see that the first-hand experience will allow them to see Chinese mainland's development and reality more directly, and countering stereotypes and building a more accurate perception.
And besides the bridge for communications, there's expected to be physical bridges. I mean, there will, according to the plans, there will be sea crossing bridges linking the mainland and Taiwan, apart from the sharing of other resources, including water, electricity, and gas. So what's your take on these measures, especially the implications of increasing physical connectivity between the mainland and Taiwan?
Yes, these infrastructure projects, they address basic needs for Taiwan's outlying islands, for like Kinmen's water scarcity. We all know that. And for example, the already operational water supply from Fujian to Kinmen has directly improved local residents' quality of life. And extending this to electricity, gas, and bridges will turn abstract cooperation into everyday benefits, daily lives that Taiwanese compatriots can see, they can touch, they can share, and they can enjoy. And this aligns with the Chinese mainland's goal of putting people first in cross relations and ensuring that exchanges will translate into real improvements. And also, they will strengthen emotional bonds by breaking down physical and psychological barriers. We see that physical connectivities, they will foster frequent casual interactions between like commuters, traders, tourists, and over time these repeated contacts will erode the stereotypes and that is built by the DPP authority in Taiwan, and will build kinship among the Chinese across the strait. So this will be the foundation of lasting peace, hopefully. And for Kinmen and Matsu, which are geographically close to Fujian, to Xiamen, I think bridges will turn the neighbors now into families in the future, making this idea of one family across the straits more concrete and more lived.
And talking about transportation, here's a follow-up question for you. The initiatives also include resuming regular direct cross-strait flights. How will that help advance cross-strait exchanges?
Well, yes, this is the part that we've been hearing the most caring part by the Taiwanese people, and especially some Taiwan news that I know, because many of them travel to Chinese mainland a lot of times a year, but now many Taiwanese Taiwanese tourists, they will aim at not just Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, those big cities and those coastal cities. They will dive into the Chinese inland, the mainland's inland. They will go to the west, go to the north. They will like to visit Xi'an, Xinjiang, Urumqi, Chongqing, and so on. So without direct flight, there will be very, very painful experience for them to take transit flights and usually tourist bus. And usually they will spend almost one whole day on road, although the direct distance is actually quite near from Taiwan to, for example, like to Xi'an or Chongqing. So that's what we can see, the human-made barrier obstacles by the DPP authority after the so-called pandemic era, and they just stick to their so-called temporary measures that blocking like direct flights, limiting the size and the capacity of the flights across the straits. And now I think there is a strong push in this very peaceful and very prosperous era. I think there's a very strong push from inside the Taiwan island that more and more Taiwanese people will want to visit, want to study, want to make exchanges and make deals with the Chinese mainland. So this desire would absolutely boost a surge in direct flights, in which I think the Chinese mainland government is now stand on the right side of whether the public will and history.
Mm-hmm. And then let's move on to businesses. More trading markets for small ticket items with the Taiwan region will be set up to support Taiwan enterprises exploring the mainland market. How will that benefit small and micro businesses in Taiwan?
I think these measures will deliver tangible benefits to Taiwan's SMEs. First, they will lower entry barriers and transaction costs. Unlike traditional trade, these markets simplify approvals, offer centralized customs clearance, and reduce tariffs, logistic expenses. And this opens a low-risk pathway for Taiwan's SMEs to sell niche products like snacks, handicrafts, or cultural goods without heavy upfront investment. And second, it offers a testing ground for market feedback. We see that SMEs can trial products in small batches and gauge mainland consumer preferences and adjust strategies quickly, minimize trial and error costs, help them to reform their offerings before scaling up. And third, they will also provide boosts for specialty industries, markets that tailor to Taiwan's unique strengths, like agriculture products, like leisure foods, crafts, and directly connected the goods to the mainland buyers. So this drives sales and build local brands and concretes trade-driven production cycle.
The policies now cover a wide range of areas, from political communication to people-to-people exchanges and to economic and trade fields. How will these policies benefit the everyday life of people in Taiwan?
Yes, I think in essence, to put it short, I think these policies is now translating Chinese mainland's goodwills and strategies and politics into concrete daily improvements for the livelihood of people on Taiwan, which, like I said, easier travel and lowering their living costs, offering more job opportunities and business expectations, and also better public services and greater sense of belonging. We all know that the Taiwanese people and the Taiwanese industry, they're now facing a very huge anxiety for peace and for prosperity, because now they face the Taiwan Independence DPP party. Now they are trying to stir wars inside the straits, and also they are facing like the U.S. tariffs, coercion from outside. So their situation is not that good. And that's why the Chinese mainland's new measures are very welcome by the major public opinion of the Taiwanese public opinion, because 90% of their working class, of their working class, of their working people, they all need more opportunities. They are not satisfied with the situation right now, because only 9% work for like TSMC, those semiconductor industries, AI industries. They earn quite high wages and salaries, but for majority of the Taiwanese working class, their average is low. Their prosperity for industry is quite limited. So that's why Chinese mainland, we have a very large market.
Okay, that was Liu Kuang-yu with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Let's take a break. We'll be back after it.
Hello, my name is Alessandro Golombiewski Teixeira. I'm a professor of public policy and management at Tsinghua University in Beijing. I am a great listener of the world today. In my opinion, The World Today is one of the best China radio programs. In The World Today, we can get the best news and analysis in what is happening now in the world. So please come to join us.
You're listening to World Today with me, Do Hongyu, in Beijing. The United States and Iran have failed to reach an agreement following high-stakes talks held in Pakistan. Washington put forward several demands, including Iran ending all uranium enrichment, stopping funding the groups of Hezbollah and Hamas, and reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran dismissed the U.S. demands as excessive. In response, it's demanding the complete lifting of U.S. sanctions, recognition of its right to enrich uranium, and the withdrawal of U.S. military forces from the region. Pakistan says it'll continue to play a constructive role in facilitating engagement and dialogue between Iran and the U.S. in the coming period. For more, Xu Yawen spoke with Zun Ahmed Khan, research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization.
Zun, the latest U.S.-Iran talks in Islamabad ended without a deal. After more than 20 hours of direct talks, what do you think are the main sticking points standing in the way of a deal?
I think, firstly, it's important to recognize that this has been a historic attempt. It's the highest level dialogue engagement that has taken place between the United States and Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, since the republic was established in 1979. We also saw that both sides firstly agreed to a 2-week pause in hostilities, and after that, highest levels of delegations, led by the Iranian foreign minister and also J.D. Vance, met in Islamabad. That said, I think the expectation initially from everyone supporting this process, and that by that I mean the vast majority of the world, was that both sides would meet for a longer period, for a prolonged period, and be able to arrive at some basic premise to continue, a stability, which was, according to also President Trump, based on the 10-point proposal sent by Iran. Now, what happened is that in a very short period, we saw that the Americans decided that the process was not working. And this is based on 2 key points. Number one, the United States is demanding Iran to cease its civilian nuclear program, enrichment of uranium altogether. Now, this goes against the basic premise of the IAEA as well. Iran has the right to pursue a civilian nuclear program. And the second has been Iranians' proposal of a toll in the Strait of Hormuz. And this is, to a great extent, Iran justifies this because of the damage that they have faced and have to deal with the reconstruction of the country and also decades of sanctions. So I think these have been the 2 key sticking points. And by and large, the perception is that the United States has maintained a relatively maximalist position. And the hope is for them to move closer to a position that can be accepted by the Iranians.
Washington says its final and best offer requires Iran to give up any ability to quickly build a nuclear weapon. But given Iran is already enriching at 60%, is that U.S. demand realistic at this point?
The funny thing about the U.S. demand is that Trump himself has announced on various occasions that they have already destroyed Iran's nuclear program. The second irony in this demand is that it was the Trump administration in its first time in office that stepped away from the nuclear deal, which was, again, something that Iran was clearly cooperating with, in the sense that Iran was pursuing a civilian nuclear program for its domestic use and not, pursuing a nuclear weapon. This is something that the IAEA stands with. This is something that the Europeans stand by as well. The U.S. was criticized heavily for walking away from a deal that took a lot of time and a lot of trust to be arrived at to begin with. That said, I think the biggest issue, obviously, the real communication that has happened between both sides is something that we are not privy to. These were very, kept away from media, kept away from public speculation. But we know clearly from what J.D. Vance has said that they will not accept enrichment. I think the real issue that the Iranians have and that any, neutral observer of this process has is that the United States expects Iran to enrich nothing moving forward, which is also not enough for a nuclear program that is for civilian purposes. And that clearly goes against what the IAEA terms and conditions are. So I think that's the real problem. Firstly, the irony that he has said that we have already destroyed Iran's capability to enrich at all. And secondly, to expect Iran to accept a condition which is against any form of international law. Iran has clearly said they do not wish to pursue a nuclear weapon. We have enough international governing bodies and other stakeholders making sure that Iran commits to that extent. But to pursue a civilian nuclear program is Iran's right under any sense of international law. So I think that's a big departure from any expectations that the Iranians could have from this negotiation.
So after the peace talk failed, we know the U.S. has announced that it will enforce a blockade on all trafficking entering and leaving Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz starting Monday. What do you make of U.S. announcement? How will that blockade of Iranian ports impact regional security and escalate the tensions?
Well, I think, firstly, there has been a pushback against this suggestion by the United States, by President Trump himself. Secondly, people are laughing at, how do you block a blockade with another blockade to erase the blockade altogether? Legally speaking, the U.S. should not be allowed to blockade the Strait of Hormuz to begin with, but then also the United States has such heavy military presence globally and especially within the region that we would not expect that to be a consideration for them. That said, I think, multiple global leaders and observers have spoken against this. What President Trump says is that this will put them, obviously, what his insinuation is that this could put the United States in a position of relative strength that might, push the Iranians to come back on the negotiation table and to accept closer to what the terms and conditions are placed by the administration itself. But I'm not sure if this will happen at all. But given, I think we still have a few days to figure out what the Trump administration is capable of doing. And secondly, I'll also add that already it has been announced, and this is a very recent development, that both sides have agreed to a second round of conversation, of negotiation. The exact time has yet to be announced, but it might be within this 2-week period. And it's possible that President Trump's proposal to block Iran's blockade is an attempt to put the U.S. in a position of relative strength within the second round of peace negotiations, which are expected within the remaining 9 days of the 2-week ceasefire.
Iran's top military advisor actually says the U.S. threat to block the Strait of Hormuz is doomed to fail, here I quote, and that Iran has powerful, unused leverage. So what exactly is that powerful leverage Iran is now signaling that it still has in reverse?
Well, I think it's clear that, for many who are looking at Iran from a very Washington heavy lens, right, through a Washington heavy lens, they forget that actually Iran is an economic power. Iran has, because of its geographical location, this immense leverage that it is capable, and internationally, legally speaking, because in the end, the Strait of Hormuz passes through Iran's territorial rights, right? Like the waters belong technically to Iran. So Iran does have the right and capability to block the strait. The U.S. imposing such a blockade would not put Iran in a position to back down. It might push them to continue. Because again, I think at this point, let's also not forget that Iran is a country of 90 million people that have faced decades of economic sanctions, of discrimination, of war threats. And they have been preparing for the possibility of a war led by the United States, coaxed by the Israelis. And they are prepared over years. They have prepared for all of these possibilities. So I believe, it's also to make the world realize that Iran is not weak and Iran is not ready to back down. And what Iran is really looking for is a change in economic status quo, is acceptance for Iran's legitimate rights and interests as an equal nation state.
Pakistan says diplomacy will continue, but after this failure, what would bring either side back? And what concrete plan does Pakistan have to make that happen?
From my perspective, Islamabad talks, whatever, was the end result, were not a failure. They were not a failure because something historic happened. A ceasefire was achieved and both sides still came closer to a lasting, understanding. And there are some contention points, but at the same time, both sides have also already agreed to a 2.0, Islamabad Talks 2.0. So I feel, within the next few days, we will see another round of conversations. And let's hope that that round can help both sides arrive at a conclusive, meaningful way forward.
That was Zun Ahmed Khan, a research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. China's consumer price index rose 1% on a yearly basis in March. The core CPI, which excludes food and energy prices, increased 1.1%. Meanwhile, the country's producer price index returned to growth in March, ending a 41-month streak of declines. The PPI rose 0.5%, reversing from a 0.9% drop in February. The National Bureau of Statistics attributed the turnaround mainly to overseas inflationary pressures and improved supply-demand dynamics in some domestic industries. For more on this, my colleague Zhao Yang spoke with Yao Shujie, Cheung Kong Professor of Economics at Chongqing University.
So, Professor Yao Shujie, China's PPI has returned to positive territory in March, which is the first time in 3 years. So, what are the main factors behind it, and what does it mean for the economy?
It is actually a very encouraging signal that the PPI, for the first time in the last 3.5 years, have entered a positive territory, rising by a moderate rate of 0.5%. But in contrast to the decline of 0.9% last month, this is a very strong signal that the Chinese manufacturing sector, the Chinese producer sector, is recovering very strongly. Over the last 3.5 years, the PPI have been entering into a negative territory, and in some months, it was highly negative. This means that there is a strong and deep adjustment in the producer sector. Particularly, most of the traditional producers have been facing a strong, constraint in terms of their expansion. And now, as the PPI has entered a positive territory, it means that lots of this constraint is starting to be diminished. And it is encouraging news for many traditional industrial sector as well as the emerging sector to become a strong expansion trajectory past. So I think in summary, the key point is that the Chinese economy is actually doing very well. This is indicated by this kind of very simple digit level of indicator. So I think the starting year of the 15 5-year plan is a very good, encouraging point of beginning.
And PPI increased by 0.5% last month, while the CPI, the consumer prices, rose 1%. How do you interpret the combination of these two?
Yes, it is a very balanced positive signals. The CPI reflect the consumer sector, the PPI reflect the producer sector. This means that the producers as well as the consumer is now coming to a point of balancing supply and demand. So there is a dynamism in between the producer and the consumer sector, which means that the Chinese structural distortion we see in the past is becoming less constraining of the macroeconomy system. So this trajectory of both positive increase in CPI and PPI is the kinds of balance that we as macroeconomy would like to see, that the whole national economy is doing very, very well. And there is certainly a very strong resilience building up in the macroeconomy system.
And China's foreign trade also surged a lot at the start of this year. China is a major exporter for EVs, high-tech, and electrical products. So, Professor Yao, do you think China can sustain this strong foreign trade momentum for the rest of the year, especially under the geopolitical turbulence?
Yes, I think this is probably the most encouraging signs or aspect of the Chinese economy. Despite a lot of conflict and despite a lot of turbulence at the external environment, particularly China has tolerated, the U.S. tariff, since the Donald Trump 1.0 version, and then the Biden administration and now the Donald Trump second terms. China have been resilient in terms of the stability of external import and export. And the trajectory is that China always on the right, on the rising trend. The export is getting stronger and stronger, and new record have been broken year after year, month after month. The first 2 months of this year is particularly encouraging. China's import and export rose by 18.7%. Measured in U.S. dollar term is even higher, and in terms of export is much more robust in terms of generating the trade surplus. And this trade surplus, lots of argument from the Western point of view, lots of economists from the U.S. they seem to accuse China of manipulating the currency. However, you see that the renminbi is actually appreciated against the U.S. dollar over the couple of months. It's now creating a record height after almost 3 years. So this means that China is actually not manipulating the currency for the export purpose. The export expansion is basically derived from China's strong manufacturing and comparative advantage in the international trade scenario. And the concept of competition and the comparative advantage is gained from China's long-term transformation from the lower medium-end manufacturing to now medium and higher-end manufacturing, as reflected by the so-called 3 new kinds of product, especially the new energy vehicles. The third month figure has not rolled out yet, but we can see some sort of export of new vehicle cars increased by 56.7%, which is based on the very strong increase on the previous year. That means the Chinese product, especially the new energy vehicles, is highly welcomed by many international markets, and it is penetrating very deeply into the European, even the Japanese and South Korean markets. This trend reflects China's breakthrough in the new energy sector, and this is going to be a very strong and very clear phenomenon for the future to come. So I'm very encouraged by the news, and I'm also very positive that China will continue to maintain this kind of export momentum in the rest of the year and the future year to come.
And with the geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and the high energy prices, what challenges could China's economy face for this year, and how can it sustain its resilience?
Well, I think the turbulence in the Middle East is a very unfortunate, situation, which purely triggered by the United States and Israel. There's no such reason to, such a bombast in the Middle East, especially Iran. They suffer, a huge casualty, and also suffer from many civilian, establishment. I hope that the fire could, cease, peacefully, and the peace will brought back to the Middle East. Unfortunately, this is also just, a personal ideal and perspective. The real situation is much harder than we expect. I mean, there is no guarantee that peace will come. This would generate a lot of turbulence and uncertainty in the oil market. The energy prices is rising to a level that a lot of consumers, including China and the United States consumers, they suffer quite badly. And people are highly unhappy about this war. However, China has been doing very well in terms of oil reserve. China has building up over the past 2 decades. There's a huge amount of oil reserve that can cushion off this kinds of short-term shock. Another development is the new energy, renewable energy resources, wind power, solar power, and also nuclear energy, and also hydroelectric. They provide alternative energy sources apart from the traditional fossil fuel, especially oil. And the new vehicle sector is now the penetrating rate is over 50% on the current sales level. This would save a lot of demand on the fossil fuel like petrols and gasolines and so on. So I think China is building up a very strong resilience.
That was Yao Shujie, Chang Kong Professor of Economics at Chongqing University. You're listening to World Today. Hungary's opposition party Tisza has defeated Prime Minister Viktor Orban's ruling coalition in parliamentary elections. Orban, who led Hungary for 16 years, has conceded defeat and congratulated Peter Magyar on his party's victory. With 98% of the votes counted at a record high turnout, the center-right Tisza party is projected to win 138 out of 199 seats in parliament. During the campaign, Tisza focused on fighting corruption and institutional reform and called for repairing relations with the European Union. Now, joining us on the line is Wang Xing-song, Associate Professor at the School of Government, Beijing Normal University. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Wang.
Thank you for having me.
Now, first of all, what key factors have driven the success of Tisza party in the election?
Well, I think the most prominent factor should be the inadequate governance by the Orban government, which has run for 16 years. And there has long been domestic concerns over issues such as corruption, inflation, economic stagnation, and so forth, all of which have weighed very heavily on the voters. And I think the Tisza party offered a quite simple message to the voters, which is the party is going to clean up the system, restore institutions, and reconnect Hungary with Europe. So that resonated very strongly, especially with the young voters and the urban voters who are finding a hard time to find jobs. And so the overwhelming victory by the Tisza party suggests this was not just an opposition surge, but rather a broad national demand for change. And another reason Tisza was able to be successful is that Peter Magyar was not seen only as a conventional opposition figure, because he came from inside the broader Fidesz world, the ruling party world. So he could speak to some of the conservative voters in a language they recognized. So in that sense, Tisza did not win by moving sharply left or right, but rather it won by presenting itself as a force for reset, for accountability, and for normalcy.
And the Tisza party campaigned on anti-corruption and institutional reform, among others. How realistic are these promises, and what concrete changes might we expect in Hungary's governance?
These are very politically realistic goals, but to be honest, there are some challenges, especially institutional challenges. The main reason why these promises sound credible is that Tisza now has something very powerful, which is a 2/3 majority in the parliament, which means that you can make constitutional amendments or institutional arrangements with that many of votes or seats in the parliament. So Tisza has already pledged to restore the rule of law, strengthening democratic institutions, and even join the European Public Prosecutor's Office, which would mean that it's going to start a very strong anti-corruption step. And that matters because now Hungary has something around 6.4 billion euros, which are being frozen in EU as recovery funds because of the governance concerns under the Orban government. So anti-corruption step is going to mean that more money is going to come from the EU. Now, the challenge is that Orban's system is very deeply embedded in all kinds of bureaucracies, the judiciary, the economic networks, even the media. So even if the new government wants to move quickly, it will not be able to change everything overnight. And so I would expect the first concrete steps to be taking stronger moves against corruption, at the same time attempting to depoliticize some of the institutions.
Now, China has expressed its willingness to deepen cooperation with Hungary. How might the Tisza-led government change its relations with China?
Well, I would expect some caution, but overall a balance. Because under Orban, obviously, Hungary became one of China's closest partners inside the EU. And so China has built some political and economic links over there. And it's possible that Tisza government is going to look at China through a more European lens. And by that, I mean the conventional European lens that pick on issues such as human rights and governance and administrative systems and all that. The Tisza government may also scrutinize projects more carefully and place more emphasis on issues like transparency and so forth. But at the same time, Hungary, after all, is still a mid-sized economy, which needs investment, it needs manufacturing, and it needs external partnerships. So I do not think Marja will want unnecessary confrontation with China. And the more realistic scenario is some kind of selective adjustment. And from China's perspective, I think China is willing to work with any legitimate government, and China has already signaled its willingness to deepen cooperation. So Beijing will likely try to test whether the new government wants continuity in economic ties, even if political atmosphere might change in the short term.
Okay, and then very briefly, within 1 minute, how about the relations between Tisza and the European Union, because it has pledged to repair ties with the EU?
We may see a thaw in their relations, but I don't think full normalization is going to happen overnight, and just simply because of the long-term deterioration of relations between Hungary and EU over many, many issues. But we do possibly see a change in tone immediately, because Marja would expect Hungary to be less confrontational inside the EU and more focused on rebuilding trust. So the overall direction should be cooperative and more predictable. Although, like I said earlier, there could still be challenges because Hungarian politics is not going to change overnight.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And that was Wang Xing-song with Beijing Normal University. And that's all the time for this edition of World Today. I'm Do Hongyu in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.